Hi, everybody. Please don't be worried about the numbers of pieces of paper. I have very large font to help my eyes. Yeah? I'll put the glasses on anyway. It's great to see so many people here today, and all of you, of course, are here because you know and love Liz, Mum, Granny. I still find it quite hard to speak in the past tense, so if I mix that up, I apologize. But today is a celebration of a wonderful life, and I'm going to have some humor in here, as Steve did, and some emotion, so feel free to laugh or cry, and hopefully the right places, or we're all going to get confused, all right? So you've heard from Steve, and we decided to go in order of age and weight, so we've got oldest and lightest first, so it's me now. But before I start, and hello to everyone in my family in Argentina, buenos días a todos. Alex and Mateo are in Argentina now, and I hope watching. Hey guys. And it was Mum's expressed wish that they continue their return trips as they'd planned and continue with their education. She was delighted to be able to see them in her last weeks, and they've written this letter to her. Dear Granny, since we moved to Argentina 5 years ago, the memories we have of you are from when we were much younger. We still remember those days when we would head back to your house after school. We would play the Great Game of Britain, or we would smash balls against the garage door, making a racket for the neighbors, or those times when we would make paper aeroplanes and see who could go the furthest. We still remember when you would cook us lasagna with your special recipe, or the times when we would go to Newton Park and stuff our faces with the full English breakfast. Great Newton Park, isn't it? We remember the times when Newton Park, when you would read us bedtime stories, or even the same ones which we never got tired of because of the way you told them. Those lovely walks we used to go on in the fields. The main thing we want to say to you is that our memories of you are wonderful, which is why we're eternally grateful that you were part of our life, and you were one of the main reasons why our childhood was as great as it was. The memories we shared will forever remain with us within our hearts. That's Alex and Mateo. Thanks, boys. So, I've done my bit in sections, okay, so I'll introduce them so I don't get confused myself. So first of all, childhood. So I had an idyllic, happy childhood. I remember playing in the garden with Steve. I remember Mum showering us with love and affection. I remember the food that she used to make, the birthday parties, the summer of 1976, which actually is pretty similar to this summer, isn't it? When we went to the hospital pool every day. I remember building go-karts and cycling in the alleys around Weston and the RUH and coming home to Mum and Dad to our happy home. I don't remember until just now riding a space hopper down the stairs. But if anyone wants to see it, I've got a 3-inch scar on the back of my head. That was one where you start crying and your parents go, "What are you crying about? Shut up." And then they go, "Oh my goodness me, okay." Yeah, we realise why. In terms of childhood, when Mum was sick in July, we talked, and I was lucky to talk to her about a lot of things, and we talked about parenthood. And I asked her what sort of parent she thought she'd been. And she said she felt she'd been very strict and a disciplinarian. Funny, isn't it? I was very happy to tell her I simply couldn't recognize that as a description of her as a mother. She was a wonderful, kind, and loving person, as all of you know. Right, the teenage years. So our teenage years, of course, had their share of angst, music, beer, braces, smoking in my case, and poor behavior. It was the 80s, so terrible music, awful clothes, questionable hair. It was the decade that gave us Phil Collins, after all. Steve had what looked like a perm, but wasn't. I had a mullet, which I was proud of. And it's ironic, really. Now it's 2022, it's actually fashionable, but I probably couldn't grow one if I wanted to. And Mum and Dad were always very tolerant. I never really knew if Mum was aware of all the horrible things that we got up to and turned a blind eye or not. And one of our particularly disagreeable habits we had was to return home, actually particularly in Steve's case, and was basically empty the contents of the fridge into a frying pan, right? So sausages, bacon, eggs, yogurt, whatever was in there, right? Mum didn't like being woken up and would come down and bellow at us for our greed and gluttony, which would then wake Dad up. And in those days, of course, when you're 18, you don't realize that if someone wakes you up when you're over 40, you stay awake, right? Adulthood. I was immensely fortunate after finishing university to go traveling around the world, visiting India, Southeast Asia, Australia. And Mum always encouraged me, I think because she had to fight and go and follow her dream and pursue her career. And I think despite having misgivings about my living in other countries, she was always very supportive. And she came to visit me with Dad in Spain and then to Argentina. And she studied Spanish so she could do her best to speak to my Argentine family. When we came back to the UK in 2002 so that I could do a master's, Mum and Dad were so supportive in that time as I struggled to change direction in my careers. And Alex and Matty, our wonderful boys, came into the world in 2004 and 2006, and Mum was already, of course, a proud granny to Emily. And the fact that we lived just around the corner meant that she was able to form a strong bond with the boys, who she showered with the same love that she'd shown to Steve and to I. Mum was not just a mum, she was also someone I could turn to in the dark times, and unfortunately we both had our share of those. We both fought with depression at different times, and we were able to turn to each other and continue to do so despite the distance. That's my phone, no it's not. And we were able to turn each other and continue to do so despite the distance when we moved back to Argentina in 2016. As Dad said, Mum had a stroke in 2012, which was so cruel, but she fought so hard to recover. She fought hard for the last 10 years. So the final days, when we came back to the UK on 10th of July, Mum was admitted to the RUH on the same day. Initially, I was not allowed to visit due to her having COVID, and ironically, I had just had COVID myself in Argentina. It's really unpleasant. But as soon as we were allowed, we visited every day, and she was so delighted, particularly to see Matty and Alex, even just for 5 minutes. Her face would just light up. I feel privileged that I was able to feed her, to wash her, to hold her hand, to encourage her. I've been away for a long time, and I can't take that back, but I feel blessed to have been here at perhaps the right time. Faith. As Dad said, Mum found her faith later on in life, and it became central to her. I've perhaps had a very different faith journey myself. I believe that all spirituality is essentially the same, regardless of the religion. So I'd like to read something briefly from the writings of the 14th Dalai Lama. I've spent a happy month in 1995 where he lives in India, teaching English as a volunteer, and his writings have been central to me. The Dalai Lama. I maintain the conviction that human nature is basically affectionate and good. If our behavior follows our kind and loving nature, then quite naturally, immense benefits will result, not only for oneself, but also for the society to which we belong. I generally qualify this love and affection as a universal religion. Everyone needs it, believers as much as non-believers. This attitude constitutes the very basis of morality. I've read this to you because I think it says a lot about Mum and her approach to how she lived her faith. She was kind, she was compassionate, she was affectionate, she was empathetic. She gave of herself to everyone. Dad. I wanted to finish today by saying a few words about Dad. Dad is the kindest, most generous, most patient man I've ever known. The last 10 years have been hard for him as they have for Mum. He cared for Mum with dedication and determination, and we are deeply proud of him. Dad, I know the last weeks have been so hard. It's been a privilege to share this time with you and indeed share cooking responsibilities, although our approaches vary. And with all these people as my witness, I wish to say that putting salmon fillets in the oven for 20 minutes is unacceptable. Dad, I wanted to share one final reading with you. I reminded Mum of this psalm when she was in hospital, and she was worried about her faith and losing her faith amongst her suffering. I told her it was normal to question your faith in such circumstances. This is Psalm 40. I patiently waited for the Lord, for you to hear my prayer. You listened and pulled me from a lonely pit full of mud and mire. You put my feet upon a rock, and you gave me a new song, a song of praise to you. Dad, God answered Mum, and he took her to be with him in heaven, and that's her song. I don't know what song God has planned for you, but you will have the support of your family and everyone here today to sing it. So, Mum, thank you for the life you've given me, and may you rest in the peace and bliss you so deserve. Thanks.
Thank you, Rob. Now Emily and Josh are going to contribute a comment.